Welcome, everybody, to the Healing Place podcast. I'm your host, Teri Wellbrock. Excited to have with me today Dave Kenney. And yeah, we tried to meet a couple times, and I was having some issues, and so I am so excited to have you here with me today. So thank you for your patience and finally joining me. So yeah.
No patience at all. I truly, I truly enjoyed and happy to be here. And of course, things like that happen to everybody sometimes.
Yeah.
Something more important when you got something you got to go to for family. You go. That's just that. So.
I know. Well, I thought your response was so sweet because it was like life happens, and I was like, yes, it does.
Yeah. So it's a new attitude now that I'm semi-retired. I've tried to take on more of.
Right.
So having to run here or there, these obligations. So
yeah.
So.
Well, good. Well, thank you again.
So thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you. You're a retired school psychologist, correct?
Yeah, I'm part-time. I teach part-time at Lansing Community College. I teach psychology, yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I was a full-time psychologist for 30 years, part-time teacher, and been all kinds of things. I think I'm more defined by my being a dad of adoptive children through our child protective services. That probably defined my life more than being a psychologist did. So just a terrific, wonderful thing to have gone through in the past tense. It was some pretty rough along the way at times, and it was pretty wonderful along the way at times as well. So it was one of those very beautiful human, times in our life where it's there. You're all in. You're living every day fully. You have great joys and great sorrows sometimes, struggles, and but I learned so much. Learned so much about myself and about people and about how to heal, how we heal, from that relationship.
And you've written 2 books about it?
Yeah, generally about healing trauma or early childhood trauma. Because I was dealing with it at school, and we didn't always know what we were dealing with because this is ACEs is a fairly new movement, trauma-informed consent training. That's fairly new. So 30 years ago, you had a hard time explaining to people, no, that he's not just a bad kid, because everybody said, oh, he's just lazy back then, or he's just, he's just mean kid, or whatever, fill in the blank that they had to kind of be able to write him off. Back then, we were just trying, no, you got to try to understand, but there was not any like the research that's coming out today, that shows that it's not just in our head. Our head is not someplace different than in our body. It's all one. It's not body versus mind. It's both. It's the harmony of the both. And disease is literally that, dis-ease. Especially psychologically, when you're at dis-ease, then that disease comes in, the behavior comes in, everything else comes in. So.
Right. Well, that's why I love ACEs and the studies,
Yes.
Science, like what's coming out about the impact, for so long. Like I remember my mom telling me, oh, Teri, it was in the past, just forget about it. And now, I couldn't just forget about it. It had an impact on my brain. Somebody on the podcast recently said, that it's now being seen, it really is a brain injury because but the cool thing is brain plasticity studies and showing how, we can change our habits and we can change our.
Sure. And when I was in grad school, it was just like, that's it. No, you lose those brain cells, they're gone.
Yeah.
And it's just so much not true. I mean, we've come, through the years to see how the brain is very changeable. And, when it gets injured, it can heal. There can be healing,
Yeah.
But it goes together with your mind, your brain and your mind. You can't separate the two.
No.
So they're one thing. And I think we were caught up in 30 years ago, we were probably farther ahead on the research for behavioral cognitive psychology, where we were starting to see some of the things that now they're doing, they're showing in the brain research, but it's other things that are so brand new, and it's marvelous time. If you're a student of human behavior and understanding, it's a marvelous time to be alive and so. But anyway, so get back into the books. The reason why I wrote the books is it's changed over the years. Even when I was writing it, the purpose changed. The first book I wrote was called Some Way Home. And it started off to be a story about my son and his life at the, not the request, but at the suggestion of his psychiatrist when he was about 6 or 7. When he was 7, he was in 2nd grade, and the teacher called me up one day and said, what's going on with Jeremy? Anything going on at home that's, upsetting him, because he's just really out of control this week? I said, well, what is it you're studying? What are you doing in class? And he said, well, I had all the kids bring in baby pictures from the time they were born until now, and then we're going to put them on a line, and I'm going to teach them about timelines. And that's academically a very wonderful thing to do, but there was no understanding that he had no past. He came to us when he was 5 years old. We were his 5th quote-unquote family. He was on antipsychotic medication, on Mellaril, when he first came to us. He was so out of control. He had been so abused.
Oh.
Yeah, it was terrible. It was terrible to watch. But anyway, through work with the psychiatrist, I was explained to the teacher, well, he didn't have any of that stuff. And that's probably what the avoidance was. I went and told the psychiatrist, and she suggested I start a journal for him about his life with us. And that way he would have that when he grew up. And I thought that was a really good idea. So I started doing that, just writing a story about what happened and how he came to us. And then I realized it wasn't good enough. He needed something right then. He needed a life story. We all have these myths. That's why I call it some way in a myth, a memoir in a myth, is we all have these personal myths that help us understand who we are, why we fit into the world, and what our life struggles are, why we're struggling with some things that other people aren't. And we all have these personal stories, but he didn't have any of that. So I decided to write both a memoir and a myth. And I continued the journal, and that became the second half of the book. And the first half is I put together from files and records and history and what he told us when he first came to us, to create sort of recreate a story of his younger life from 0 to 5. And then I realized this is a great format for just talking about healing, both from the point of view of the professionals and the point of view of the parents and the family. And it all came together. It kept growing, I guess, until I finally got it where I like it. I mean, it's a beautiful story. I think hopefully it was meant to be both literature and also like a case study in trauma and what happens and what can you do about it. And then the second book I wrote was a nonfiction discussion about trauma, about early childhood trauma, what normal healing is like, because I don't think we talk enough about what normal is. We always, psychology, we talk a lot more about disease than what it is that we want. We don't spend a lot of time on health. So I talk about health, talk about then how healthy development can be affected by the trauma. And then thirdly, about what do we do? How can we help these children heal? Because I definitely believe that they can heal.
Right.
So many people think that after 5, the personality is set. You got these problems, you're always going to have these problems. It's just not true.
No.
Malleability of the brain.
What's the title of the second book?
Crossing Infinity, or Healing Our Children Ourselves. Because I think that in this day and age, we've given too much over to the experts to try to say that we're gonna take our child to them and they're gonna heal our child. Right. We're gonna to a special ed teacher, we're gonna take them to a psychiatrist or a social worker or whoever, and they're gonna tell us what to do to heal our children. And the thing is that nobody's healed by anybody else. No, we do it ourselves. We got to do it ourselves. Right. Because what's the healing? The hurt is in the belief. The hurt is in the emotion, in the emotional world of the person. That's where the hurt is. To heal it, only they can heal it by changing those beliefs. We can instruct them. We can help them, encourage them. We can, most importantly, love them and set the environment up for them to succeed. But in the end, we all have to heal ourselves. So. Yeah. And how beautiful, I mean, you obviously know what's been going on with my mom, and listeners have, with my mom's addiction and her struggles. And what you just said was so beautiful because, well, one, what popped into my head is it's never too late to do the healing work, right. With children or whether it's an 83-year-old, alcoholic.
But yeah, to just love, offer that love. I mean, that's all I can do is offer her love.
That's it.
But she has to do the healing work, and we can offer a hand to hold and guidance. Yeah, but that's beautiful.
There's a great book called The Course in Miracles that says,
Marianne Williamson.
Well, no, that's she
talks about it a lot.
Yeah, she teaches a lot about it, but it was actually written by two psychologists in Columbia University back in like early 1970s.
Okay.
And it started actually with they were trying to work on a problem they had with each other, and then this book came out of it called the Course in Miracles. But one thing that's said over there, and I just love to hear, is that people are either calling out for love, they're either seeking love, or they're giving love. You know, that's the only two things that we can do. We're either giving it or we're seeking it. And in either case, the correct response to that is to love.
Right.
You know, if someone loves you, it's correct to love them back. If somebody is seeking love, it's only correct to give them love. You know, so in either response, our job is pretty simple. You know, it's just try to love as much as possible. You know. Right. So.
Beautiful.
I sort of talk about three different kinds of things that I think you need as a mindset to help children who have been hurt and who have been, you know, have had that severe ego injury, that attack, whether it be from, you know, human trafficking or from abuse or from neglect or from whatever cause. You know, that ego injury is so tough in three ways. I guess overall, I want to say to try to heal a child, and back up a half a step, is to say that it's kind of like plate spinning. You ever remember those old spinners?
Yes.
On television, they start one plate, they get it going real fast, and they move on to the next one and get it going.
Right.
Go back to the first and get it. It's kind of like that, you know. When you're raising a child who's been hurt, or you're teaching a child who's been, you have to approach it in very many levels at once. You have to approach it, first of all, on the safety level. It's like Maslow's hierarchy. You got to get the safety level first, and then the needs, for food and water, and then for, you know, being safe, and then and you know, before you get up to love and esteem, where some of the injury is, you have to have all these things in order. So you deal with the behavior, deal with behavior and lack, because you can't have unsafe, uncontrolled behavior. But at the same time, once you get going, you have to deal with where the hurt really is.
Right.
It's in the mind, okay? And it's the sense of, one of the worst things that happens is these kids always feel guilty. They always feel ashamed and hurt. And it's a terrible thing, because no matter what happens, they expect that they did something wrong. At the same time, they fight against it so strongly, because it's a core issue. It's not just, oh, I did something wrong. It's I am wrong.
I am wrong, right.
I am bad. I am broken. Look, I'm evil, you know? And that's what, you can't live with that, you know? So they have that all the time. You've got to be able to overcome that. And I'm talking about three ways, I think three mindsets that you have to have in working with them. And one of them is, you were just talking about love, and I called it sort of ego light love. Okay, because we never really can get totally past our own ego, no matter how much you try. The whole story of Buddha is about a guy who went out and tried all these different ways to get rid of the ego, never could. Finally gave up trying, and then he was enlightened, you know. And it's like that. It's not you can't love, you know, a romantic love is a completely, totally ego love. I love you because you're special, and you love me because I'm special, you know. And the more you love me, the more special I feel, you know. That's not the kind of love I'm talking about. I'm talking about sort of an ego-less love. But since we can't ever get to ego-less, I just say, well, let's try to get ego-light. Let's not,
right.
Let's not let perfection ruin the good, right? So,
great way to put it, yes.
Yeah. So we gotta love these kids, and it's gotta be non-specific. It can't be a love like, you're so special, I'm so special. It's gotta be, this is a love because we love each other, we treat each other with respect. You know, because we love each other, we're gonna protect and take care of each other. And everybody you're equally equal and have equal rights, you know, those type of things. Another one I talked about was another one I sort of tried to frame, because I couldn't find the right words, you know, in the existing vocabulary to frame some of these ideas, you know. The other one was to have a radical commitment to a gentle truth. Okay? And that some of the people, there's a lot of, I think, misunderstanding about truth. Some people use truth as a weapon, you know, and they say the meanest things that you can imagine, and they say, well, I'm only telling the truth.
Right.
Right. And that's sort of that's a radical truth. You know, they're trying to be radically truthful. And I'm not saying that. I'm saying the truth is a gentle truth. The truth is one that helps us grow. It helps us confront things about ourselves we don't like, you know. It helps us, you know, forgive ourselves. You know, all those things are really super important. So there's a radical commitment. No matter what happens, I'm going to love this child, but with a gentle truth, not with you know, I'm going to correct them all the time, or I'm going to force them to being good, you know, I'm not going to be radical about it.
Right.
But my commitment is radical, if you can understand, because trust is such a big issue with people who have been violated. That when you're raising a child or teaching a child that has had some type of trauma, in early childhood, trust is so important. You've got to learn to do what you say and say what you do. And it's got to, so there's that, it's got to be, you know, you can remember the old days back, I know you're probably too young, but for like the Honeymooners and Jackie Gleason was an old television show. There was such a funny thing. Everybody would say, we would laugh hysterically when you go to the moon.
Oh, yeah. To the moon, Alice.
To the moon, Alice, to the moon. And everybody would laugh. Ha, ha, ha. Well, it's not so funny when you look down today, when we look at all the spousal abuse and all that in homes. It's not funny, you know. So we have to come up with saying only the things that we mean. We can't say, oh, I'll kill you someday, because people say, or I'm going to kill myself. People throw that out a lot, okay? We can't say things that we don't mean. You know, trust is so important, but it's got to be gentle at the same time. First of all, because they're children. Second of all, because they've been hurt, you know? And the sense of shame is so prevailing. It hurts so much that they got to do one of two things. They either got to say, okay, if I'm bad, I'm going to be really good at being bad. I'm going to be, you want to see what bad is? You ain't seen nothing yet because you haven't seen the kid. Now the kid, he's going to show you what bad is, you know? That's the one way to go, to accept it, to make it part of your personality, which doesn't do much except it sort of gets them wound up in a continual loop of hate and anger and frustration, you know? Because they really don't believe that they're bad, but they do. You see,
right?
Yeah. Or it's like they believe it, but they can't. You know, it's like it's so horrible. We really can't believe that about ourselves, but we do. So it presents them with an unsolvable problem. You know, the other kids that have that might have the same feeling of I'm broken and I'm no good. I'm evil. They deal with it and say, no, that's not true. The other thing you can do is not accept it. You can deny it. You know, so they deny it, and a lot of little girls. You see a lot of little girls doing this. The boys do this too, but more. It's more of a little girl thing, where they really just try to be perfect. You know, doing out there, they're getting every green light award, every good classmanship award. They're the teacher's pet. Every time you go to a conference with the teachers, they're wonderful. Oh, wish I had 50 like her. You know, and they just try so hard to be perfect because it's not them. They're not broke, it's the world. And what's sort of insidious about that is that they're so good at that everybody kind of just says, oh, that's wonderful. Look how sweet she is. Look how hard she's trying. But she's trying because there's underneath this thing that hurts so much.
Yes. I worked for a mental health agency in schools, and my undergrad is in psychology, and I remember teachers saying to me, about, needing help in the classroom with kids that they knew, were having some issues. And then we would start to talk about, are they coming in hungry, other things that were going on with these kids beyond just misbehavior in the classroom. But then I remember talking to them and saying, what you really need to think about is those really quiet ones,
Uh-huh.
or the ones who are, always
Right.
doing everything exactly as they're told, because they could be just as traumatized and experiencing just as much
Yeah.
stuff
Yeah.
in their home
Yeah.
environment. Because just because some kids are presenting it and it's just like there, like the signs, like
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And those kids get, I mean, with my son and my daughter, it was kind of this, that was sort of the situation. And, he got all the help he needed right away. We all jumped on it because he was destroying things and he was doing some crazy, just some really out of crazy. Well, read the book, there's tons of stuff he was doing. But she was like little perfect. So it's like with little time, it's like, oh, that's so good. We used to say my son was our treasure and our daughter was our gift from God. For him, we had to do a lot of digging to get to the good stuff, With her, it was just like everything seemed so easy. And we were taking in by that. And because we're so overwhelmed in some other ways, we just never questioned it. And I see back then when she got to 7, 8, 9, the pure stuff and we get in trouble now. She can't take any blame, so she's always blaming other people and all these things. The lying was just tremendous. All these things started coming up, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And the trouble is, you lost 5 years,
right.
and then everything was okay. And it's so much easier to help change it back then than it is when they're 13 and 14. It's not impossible, but it's just like, oh. So sure, I wrote that in the book for people to watch out for those kids who in kindergarten, first grade, second grade, just trying so hard to be so perfect.
Yeah.
Not healthy. It's really not healthy.
That was me. I was that perfect little girl.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
I was a little one troublemaker. I got sent home in 6th grade for the entire school year for lunch and recess after lunch.
Oh.
Because I started up, this is back, in the 60s, late 60s, right? So I decided that we're going to have a sit down on the recess after lunch, and we wouldn't come in. So I organized people to, it only lasted a very short time, and my consequences lasted all year, so.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And actually, it worked out okay for me because I was happy. Actually, got out of school. I was not elementary school was not my place. I was
not your gig.
Yeah, I did not. I was happy to get out every day for like an hour. Get out, get home, walk through the neighborhood. I play little games with myself on the way, and stuff.
Right. So you give presentations and you speak and so talk about that a little bit.
Well, I'm trying to, like I said, just get the word out. I'm at this point in my life, I'm like I said, I'm professionally, my job is kind of going down to very little. I'm teaching a few classes, enjoying it. And my kids are all grown up. Jeremy is 30 now and so happy and successful. It's always like that time of life. It's like, okay, and I'm thinking about things. I think, wow, you know what? I did learn a lot on the way. I wasn't very smart to begin with, but I did learn some things on the way. And I hate for them to just stop now. Because I think about being a young psychologist and being a young parent, and not knowing what was going on with Jeremy. We were not told what was going on by the agency. So we were over our heads. So I wished I knew so much, what I know now, kind of thing. So I'm just trying to get it out in any way possible. We're talking. I've always liked speaking. I've always done like professional staff development days or going to places and giving talks. PTAs and to CHAD and to a couple at a university and just different places just to give talks and to meet with people. I love talking to groups of people and getting people laughing and getting people to think differently about things. And so I'm offering that as one format that I can go out and try to spread the word that these kids can be healed, and this is how that goes on. And by the way, if you have stuff that you're holding on to from childhood, you can still heal yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It's not over. So just trying to get out there and teach whatever people need when, with that group. I don't know. Each group is different. And each group has a different need to hear a different thing on a certain day, So trying to match the need with what I have to say for the day,
Right.
Like that, the PowerPoint I sent you, I just simply took the second book that I wrote, the one that's a nonfiction discussion about trauma and it, and I just did a PowerPoint for the entire book. So that's because as a teacher now, that's what I do. I do PowerPoints and then I present my lecture, but they're really my notes. Because at my age, I'm starting to forget, like, what am I talking about, you know?
I got you.
Go off on tangents. And I go there and I forget the details. And so I flip this, I look up, oh, okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Right.
And it can help me, you know, so it helps the audience, hopefully, and it helps me. So they're my notes. So I just prepare it ahead of time, and then whatever part that a group needs to hear, I'll try to give it to them, and try to give them what I know and what I've learned, share with them. So. And
then you blog. You have a blog as well.
Yeah, we do, and just working on that this morning. We're putting together. I used to call them pictopoems, but my wife doesn't like that, so I came up with another more poetic saying. But I write poetry as a hobby, so I've been putting together as sort of a hobby these poems on pictures. There's some websites that give you free pictures, and some art pictures, some really gorgeous pictures. And I'll find something that matches a poem, and I'll put them both together and sort of create like a poster type of thing. So,
beautiful, yeah.
That's mostly the blog is that right now, just to try to, you know, have people be attracted to the website. You know, so I have things on the website. One thing is a story about heroes. Since I was an English lit major, there's part of that, you know, in what I do, what I talk about as well. So I understood that literature, especially the heroic literature of the past, was always sort of this teaching stories. There were stories that taught people how the hero is and how the hero becomes. And one of the things you find out that's true around the world in all the different heroic literature is this notion that the hero is never the hero at first. Like Hamlet, he's always sort of questioning and frozen, doesn't know what to do, overwhelmed with the ideas of, you know, unable to act, you know, unable to do what a hero does. Until they have to go into hell.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Hamlet jumps into the grave and he sees, you know, the head of his old jester when he was a little kid. You know, Odysseus goes into the underworld. I mean, Odysseus goes in and he sees Achilles, and he talks to Achilles and he helps somebody out. Beowulf swims to the bottom of the lake to meet the mother of the monster. So there's the grand monster is in the lake. I mean, that was so Freudian, you know, 200 years before Freud, right?
All right.
It's always a sort of descent into hell. St. John of the Cross called it the dark night of the soul, you know, and when the hero comes out of that, learns to come out of that hell, get to the other side of it, that's when they become the hero. And only then do they become the hero.
Right.
And what I think is so important about that is there's so many kids that I worked with in high school. There are so many kids that are anxious and depressed these days. I think it's oh gosh, I'm losing my words.
Oh yeah.
Epidemic. I see it everywhere. Then over the 30 years, it's just multiplied and multiplied. Okay. Well, they're being taught that, you know, depression is caused by a chemical imbalance in the brain. Which, yes, there is a correlation between the chemicals and the behavior, but that doesn't prove causality, first of all. And if that's what you tell them, what they believe is that they're broken.
Right.
And if they're broken, they can't do anything about it. So it relieves, in one way, psychiatrists have sort of pitched this, you know, it's not your fault, it's a disease thing. So people would come get treatment because people were not getting treatment because of the negative impact of being labeled as mentally ill or some such thing.
Right. Which is why I love ACEs so much, because it's stating that, yes, you know, you can have these things as a result, anything from physical things like heart disease and diabetes to, you know, depression, anxiety, symptoms of PTSD. But again, it all comes back to, you know, the brain. You experience these traumatic events. Now you can do the healing work.
That's right.
to change those things and to build resilience. Resilience is huge.
Right.
And teaching kids about resilience, I mean, that's truly, I believe, the answer.
Or even emotions. I mean, we don't teach kids about emotions. I mean, and we know that the best single predictor of life success is emotional intelligence. It's the best single predictor of school success is verbal intelligence. But the best single predictor of life success is emotional, being able to understand your feelings, to be able to react to them, to not control them, but be able to get the message, to understand them and then to react accordingly, to let them go so you can have another feeling in the next moment, all these things that are so important. Understanding other people, when they're depressed, how do you encourage them? When they're angry, how do you calm them? When they're afraid, how do you comfort them? That's all emotional intelligence. And if we would teach that, that would be amazing. But you talk to seniors in high school and ask them, why do we have emotions? And they have no idea. They don't understand how they operate, or they don't understand what they're for at all. Just a nuisance, really, that either make me feel bad or, I can try to feel good, but that's the depth of understanding, which is such a shame.
It is a shame. Yeah.
Yeah, because we know we can teach that stuff. And we teach it a lot of the time through stories, which is why I love stories. I teach kids through stories, and part of my healing story was meant to be healing literature,
Yeah.
I love stories,
Yeah.
Songs, poetry. Sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. My son writes poetry, and I love his poetry. And so, I just think that's an amazing way to express.
Yeah, you should go on my website and check out the posters on.
I will. I'll stick one on this video. So.
Okay. Oh, yeah, they're cool. I like them.
Yeah.
And we're thinking about even maybe selling them or something, but we're putting them right now up there,
Awesome.
That's idea poems.
One of the things when you were talking on my website, I think when you scroll to the bottom of the first page, like my intro, my homepage, it's got a little kid in a superhero cape, with their arm up in the air, like they're getting ready to take off, flight. And it says, learn to be your own hero. And so that's kind of, what I picked up from what you were saying is, we all learn to be our own heroes, because we're the ones, again, who have to do the healing work. We have to, I tell people all the time when I give presentations, in my blog, you have to go through the darkness to get to the light.
Yeah.
I mean, for that healing journey, you've got to go back into it. You can't go around it. You can't go under it. You can't pretend like it's not there. You've got to go back and work on it. So, yeah. I'm sorry. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I forgot to tag that whole story I was telling you about. That is the point of what I was trying to say. Yeah. I get to the point where it's like, isn't it? It's so much better for the high school student to think that they're a hero in training than to think they're a broken machine, because you can't do anything with a broken machine. But if you were a hero in training, you're learning. And as you're learning and progressing, that's what's good. And if that's good, then you can't be broken. You can't be, with that thought and belief that you're broken. Let's get rid of it now. Let's put something else in there that's healthy. Right.
And do that, and once they can forgive themselves and forgive other people, then they can be the hero to other people, because they have more now than those people who never went through a bout of depression have.
Right.
They know some things and feel some things that nobody else has experienced, and they learned how to control them, and they learned how to get through them and to heal them. And now they can do that for other people. Now they are the hero, So,
Yeah, so, I call that, I've labeled that the gifts within the chaos, and that learning to, when you do make it through, that you do get these gifts of understanding and gifts of compassion and gifts of, again, empowerment of, I did it. I made it through. I've learned these things, and then to be able to turn back around and offer them to others, and help them through their chaos.
And to even accept them when you first see them, because so many of us will see somebody suffering and just like immediately turn away because it's too uncomfortable or it's too scary, Right. Well, you've been through that and you know how that felt to be in that. Then it's the compassion that you said comes out, and then you can reach out and do the rest of it. But it's the first thing is just that compassion.
Right.
Not judge the person. Oh, look at you. You're so messy, or you're dirty, or you're lazy, or you're whatever, you know. You get past all that stuff and just see. And that's the other thing is I talk about in the book, practicing extra forgiveness. But I think now I like to call it more, think about it as searching for the innocence in everybody.
Yeah.
So when you look for the innocence and you see all this other stuff, you go, no, that's not it. You know, that's all the nonsense or all the illness or the dysfunction or the ugliness or whatever it is. No, there's an innocence in every one of us. And as you search for that, that helps them find it, you know, that help when you can find it and then you show it to them and that changes their lives, you know, that helps change their lives. So
yeah, that's beautiful.
Do it. Yeah. Yeah.
We could all just connect on that level.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Looking for the innocence in each of us. That's a great lesson from the Course in Miracles.
Yeah.
If you're ever interested in reading that book, it's an interesting book. The first time I tried to read it, it made no sense. And it sounded like crazy nonsense, you know, like somebody was taking too much acid back in 1960. But if you look at it, I found out later, I started about the 13th chapter. And you start reading the 13th chapter, it made so much sense to me. And then I read it around and read it to the end, and then it started to get this first thing. Now I understood the first 13 chapters. But if you start at chapter 1, it doesn't make any sense. So just a thing.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah.
So I have to ask you one of my favorite questions.
Okay.
Only because I love the answer so much. So if you could meet anyone, dead or alive, to help you with your continued journey, who would it be?
Oh my. Wow. There's so many. There's so many that have gone on before. Obviously, Jesus is my first number one inspiration, and I try to follow his teaching. I studied the scriptures and everything to try to find out what he actually taught. And it's not all the stuff that's there. You got to find it. It's like that pearl in the field that you got to find, you know. My
dad was a Jesuit brother, Catholic. Oh, he was a Jesuit brother for 8 years.
I grew up. I'm sorry, my dad taught at a Jesuit university.
Oh, did he? Okay.
I kind of grew up in a Jesuit university, sort of.
Yeah, so my dad was a theologian. I mean, in my eyes, because he studied scripture and he studied it for 8 years in the seminary, and so we would have these deep philosophical conversations. One of the things I missed most about him. I mean, my dad had his issues, but he was just. I loved our powerful. He gave great hugs, and I loved my deep theologian talks with my dad.
Yeah, I used to have those too with my dad, and I miss them now. Not here. I could get together for him and Jesus, Buddha. Let's see, Saint Francis, Martin Luther King Jr. Just so many that taught about healing and about love. Yeah. I love the Zen stories, but I can't say one person, like, you heard of Zen koans before. They're the Japanese version of Buddhism, and they have these little teeny sayings that are like little stories. You heard the sound of one hand clapping, thrown around a lot. That comes from an old piece story, yeah. There was a master sitting on a hillside, and he was facing the full moon. Okay, he was facing east, and the full moon was rising. And he was watching it, and sort of meditating and being sort of peaceful and with one. And a student comes running up to him and says, Master, please help me out. I'm so confused now. And the master says, well, what is it? What's bothering you? He said, well, could you please show me the moon? I don't know what the moon is. And I was in the marketplace today, and everyone was talking about the moon, the full moon this, the full moon that. And I just didn't know what it was. Please show me the moon. Well, the master was a few words. He simply raised his finger, and he pointed to the moon, which was, by the way, behind the student, because the student was facing his master. And he pointed to the moon, and the student looked up, and all he saw was the master's finger pointed, in the sun, in the moonlight. And from that moment on, he believed that the truth, or the moon, was his master's finger. From there on. Love that story. It is
all about perspective. Yeah.
But it's also about, we oftentimes confuse the finger that points to the truth itself. Our back is to the, all he had to do was turn around and he would see the moon. But instead, he was so focused on his master being a source of truth that he thought it was the finger that pointed
to it, right?
Yeah. And the Zen love that that whole sense of you have to get rid of or eradicate the stench of Zen in order to find enlightenment, in order to find that which it's pointing to. All the great teachers, they were pointing to the truth. They were not the truth. And their followers get so confused, they make them the truth. And so many bad things follow from that.
Right.
And it happened to every great teacher, Socrates is another one I'd love to sit and talk with.
Yeah. So that's a great lead in, because my next question is if there's any truths or facts that you want to clarify for listeners.
Oh God, there's so many. One is that these children are now where people have been so abused they can't change. It's a personal thing. One thing I have the father near the end of this first book, Some Way Home, I have the father meeting with the case manager from 0 to 5, and then this adoptive father, and they confront each other in the end and have this discussion. And he's talking about healing. And the manager says, can you ever really heal a children? Do they ever really heal? And he says, well, yes, they heal. And my son has been healed. I know that. But there's still scars. You don't heal scars.
Right.
They fade away. And the less you pay attention to them, the more they fade away, because they're just scars, But the healing has already taken place. The healing is there, and yet there may be things that we still have to work on. I guess is what I'm trying to say. So the truth is that these kids oftentimes are seen as aggressive and angry, and they are angry. I shouldn't say that. They seem violent. They seem like bad kids, and they're just not. They're not. They're more like what I call yes means no kids, because the opposite. They tend to have the opposite to reaction to normal things. Like in school, normally we just we make corrections on kids' papers in order that they learn from it.
Right.
Okay. But those corrections, those red lines on a kid who's going through this kind of a thing, it's really traumatized. They don't oftentimes see them as a positive thing. They really can't stand to have that judgment placed on them. So a lot of times they just avoid turning things in or not getting work on just because they can't stand the thing that we're trying to do to help them, And it goes back to that shame thing. For instance, when he first came to us, if we were say, hey, what'd you drop that piece of paper for? Pick that up and throw it away, please. Boom, you could start a 3-hour explosive, violent, reactive things people might call, what's it called? When a spoiled child throws a temper tantrum. It's not a temper tantrum, but oftentimes it gets labeled that. So that's one of those ideas I'd love to get rid of. And they would go on for hours. And simply that if you could rephrase that question to say, if I learned to teach myself to say, hey, do me a favor and pick that piece of paper up, throw it away, no problem. But if I said like, hey, what'd you do that for? Why did you throw, when I made him the guilty point, when you focus to them and their behavior as wrong, it is such a hair trigger. They immediately go into survival, into fight, flight, reaction that talk about in ACEs. And you got to kind of learn that understanding the perception from their point of view, you say things differently just to see that, so they don't have these short-circuited times that they don't, and oftentimes with those explosive behaviors, they don't remember the next day what happened. It's almost like a electrical seizure almost that overcomes them, and
when they're in that survival mode. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And they don't remember necessarily everything they said or they did the time before. It's just all sort of a vague feeling of I did something wrong again,
Right.
Oh, but anyways, there's so many things I'd like to people to understand. The lazy, let's get rid of the word lazy. I just can't stand that word because it doesn't. There's so many things that are answers but not solutions.
Right.
So he's lazy. Okay, so he's got a personality that doesn't want to do anything. What can you do with that? Nothing, really. It's a solution, but not an answer to the problem. Like ADHD oftentimes is a solution these days, but not an answer.
And I go to lazy. Is it because he is a person afraid to fail, afraid to succeed?
Yeah.
What's the underlying factor here?
That's it. And then see, when you get to that level, then there's something you can do about it.
Right. Exactly.
There's something you can, even in extreme cases where kids, get so upset, you can just say, I'm not going to grade your stuff. You can put it in your grade book, whatever you want to put in your grade, but I'm not going to put anything on your papers at all. Maybe a couple pleasant comments. That's it. You just do what is necessary for that child to learn. You got to get rid of the obstacles. That's one thing I think we can be really good at, is helping a child by getting rid of the obstacles. We can't crawl in their head and make the right connections for them. We can't crawl in their heads and tell them how to think about things,
Right.
But we can do a couple of things. We can set the environment up. That means also the emotional environment and our relationship. We set it up in a way that they feel safe and they don't feel like they're going to be judged or attacked. Because judgment and attack is the same thing to them.
Right.
It feels the same way. You may say, well, it's I before E, and you put E before I, and they feel like you're attacking their existence, really, almost. It's all that existential for them,
Yeah.
You just kind of understand from their point of view what works, and that's our job as the teacher, or that's our job as the parent, really. That we can do. And I think
the bottom line through all of it, what I'm hearing is just compassion.
Oh, it's the number one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with healing, try to be a help. You have to be, you have to love, but not, again, a special love, a real sort of what the Greeks used to call agape love, more spiritual love. I call it ego light love because it seems so kind of strange and, far out there, but ego light, I think you get a sense that,
I think it's and I've referred to it as just, like soul to soul or light to light, that we're all these beings of light.
Yes.
We can just connect to one another's light. Because the darkness is the stuff of the ego, like you talked about.
Yeah.
Where the light is the stuff of the soul. If we can just learn to connect that way.
Well, then that's it. I mean, that's what they call in the Course in Miracles, they call it the Holy Instant. And it took me 10 years. So my first 10 years as a psychologist, I thought my job was to solve everybody's problems. And it is just so far from the truth. You're just causing trouble when you're trying to help somebody else. If you're telling them how to solve it, you're just making it worse, It's that connection, like you said, that connection of me to you in that sort of sense of innocence and love. That there's a pure sense of being to being, like you said, light to light,
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, that is the healing moment. That is what heals people. You don't have to say, okay, well, it's because this happened or because you feel this or, do this next time.
Yeah, I was going to say, give them the to-do list, right?
Yeah. Those can come later or those can be suggestions or whatever. But at the point of the real healing is that person-to-person contact.
Yeah. I know for myself, I did my life-altering moment was EMDR therapy.
Oh, yes.
With my trauma history is crazy loaded. And so I did EMDR for 4 years, 98 sessions, but it wasn't so much things that my therapist told me as we worked through the trauma, but there were just there's two things that stuck out to me so much, and one was be gentle with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was such a foreign concept to me. So learning to be gentle with myself. But again, that was me doing the work. That was me learning to be my own hero, be my own, friend, be kind to myself. and then the other was out of my brain. It's gone. It'll come back
I know
to me.
so well.
My menopause brain is what I call it. Yeah, so be gentle with myself, and I still can't remember the other one, so maybe I'll remember it.
Well, let me take up on the one. Like, it's so important. You know, that is that I remember when I was about 21 or 22, it occurred to me one day I was walking home and I was thinking about different things. And it came to me, Jesus said, you know, to love others as you love yourself. And it was the first time I had been raised Catholic. I'd heard that saying a million times, you know, by the time I was 22, right?
Right.
Sunk in that he was saying that you love people as yourself, not instead of yourself. I'd spent the entire 22 years trying to love other people instead of myself because I didn't think too much about myself at all.
Right.
I was pretty down on myself, but I still tried very, very hard to love everyone. But that gets into then ego, you know. If I'm going to try to love someone better than myself, then I'm really trying. And love doesn't have anything to do with trying. You know, trying to convince you that I'm a nice guy, trying to convince you that I know what I can tell you to do that will heal you, or trying to do all those things. It's only building up my ego. It's doing nothing for you as another person. If I care about you and you're the one hurting, it's like almost insulting to be talking about, well, you know, I'm a great psychologist, and if you only do this, B, and C, and do that, that's the way I say it. It's almost an insult, you know?
Yeah.
Besides the fact that that's not how, I mean, any technique that we talk about can be a really cool tool, but it also can be used terribly wrong.
Right.
Because it's not what we do in the end, it's what we do while we're doing it that makes the difference in our relationships, you know?
Yeah, I agree. And I love how you said that, you know, the tools can be offered, but it's how they're used. I know, you know, one of the big things with me when I first started dealing with my trauma history was, you know, breathe, breathe, breathe. I was so uncomfortable being in my own body. I didn't want to bring attention to my breath because I was terrified to bring focus to myself.
Yeah.
My panic attacks were so intense. And
Yeah.
so focusing on breathing techniques made me more panicky, more anxious.
Yeah.
But when I learned to be comfortable in my own body through other methods, then I was able to start utilizing breath work.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember that I had terrible panic attacks from, I think just about 19 years old to about 22, 20. I didn't know what they were. You know, I thought I'm crazy. My mother was mentally ill, so there was a whole stuff going on, you know. I moved out of the house when I was 15. Just because our house burned down and she lost it really for like years after that, you know. And all of us I was one of 7 kids. 6 of us moved out within a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. So when I was 19, I was starting to try to figure out, you got to kind of try to figure out what crazy was yours and what crazy was hers. And because there's so much as a child you just take in, you know, unthoughtfully, or you know, you don't you just absorb it from your parents.
Yes,
you know?
Right.
So I have to figure that out, and then I started having these panic attacks, and I didn't know what they were, and they got really bad for a while. In the last 3 years, the last 3 or 4 months that I was in East Lansing supposedly as a student, I was in my apartment, and I wouldn't leave. I was afraid to leave, you know, because of the panic attacks, you know.
Yeah. Like agoraphobic, right.
But I mean, it's just the worst possible feeling that you can imagine, you know.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's hard to explain to people who haven't had them how well it feels.
Well, and that was the other thing. I remembered it, and so that's perfect timing. So the other thing was just notice. So those were the 2 powerful things that I learned. But the just notice part of it was not to sit in judgment of what was surfacing, like these emotions and what you talked about earlier with, you know, teaching children, you know, and emotional intelligence, is that I would just notice these scary sensations, or just notice the anxiety or the panic symptoms, or, you know, the racing heart, the racing thoughts, and but not sit in judgment and just say, okay, something's being triggered. I learned to just be so patient with myself.
Right.
And that those were the two most powerful lessons in 4 years of therapy. It wasn't her giving me to-do lists or, you know, try this, do this. It was just me learning those things about myself.
I didn't go to a therapist. I wouldn't go to a therapist because my mother had gone to therapists for so long, and they had gotten her hooked on barbiturates, and they gave her over 100 shock treatments. So that really her personality had ruined her ability to concentrate on more than one thing at a time, and her memory was just really, I mean, it just made things much, much worse, you know. So I was really afraid of therapists and doctors. So, but I moved from, I was about 21, I moved from East Lansing, where I was supposed to go to school, to Lake Tahoe in California, where my sister lived. And I stayed with her for a few months, and then she moved to Montana. But I found, or she directed me to a place in the Tahoe Basin that was called the Force Center, which was a meditation center. And I learned a certain kind of meditation. I practiced that for 3 years. And I learned the things that you were talking about. You know, I learned about the breathing, and learned about thoughts, you know, just how my thoughts worked, how my emotions worked, you know. We had lots of little techniques, you know. One was that we imagined ourselves as the body of glass. You know, when it sounds a lot like your experience of Just Watch, you know, because it's like you're completely transparent, and anything that comes at you from a different person, if it's hostile, if it's angry or whatever, snide or whatever, you don't have to react to it if you just look at it and be aware of it and just let it pass through you. Just let it go right through you like you were a body of glass. And it really works. I was a waiter for years after that, and practicing it, and you can diffuse people really quick. They're really hostile by just getting into that mindset, you know, and that was our technique to do it.
Yeah, I love that technique. That's beautiful.
Yeah. Well, there's lots of them. I studied for 3 years, and it really changed my life tremendously. Because I think a real mess then.
I think that's what's beautiful about our conversation right now, is that, and what people can maybe take away from it, is that it's not so much, you know, like there's one definitive answer, cure all. It's that, you know, I like to tell, when I worked with kids, it was filling their toolbox with, you know, all of these coping skills and options. You know, we would watch YouTube videos and do kids yoga, and we would try meditation, and we would just, you know, artwork, you know, drawings a lot of times, because they couldn't talk about it, but they could draw about things. And there's so many different avenues for healing, and you just have to find the one that works for you.
And for them, you know,
right.
Not really about us. Like, that's what we're talking about, our own healing. But yeah, if you're working with them.
With kids, yeah, for sure. Yeah. What works for them? You know, what's going to work for one kid is not going to work for another.
Yeah, and I think it's like you said, but it's like, okay, there's this 10,000 ways to express love, okay? And you can choose any of them, what's best for that communication, for that relationship, or that circumstance, okay? But there is one thing. That's the one thing you got to communicate is love.
Yeah.
You communicate it, you just be it, you know, and it's because it's non-directional, it's non-specific. It just goes out, and it's almost like a force field, like you mentioned earlier, you know. It's just a superpower or whatever. You just let it go, and it goes out. You can't be judgmental. As soon as you're in the judgmental mind, it's off. As soon as you're in the mind, it's off, you know.
Right.
And, one thing we haven't talked about at all is humor. Humor is such a healing part of these relationships, you know, and so much can be taken, like the ego itself. You cannot fight the. Did you ever see a movie called the Devil's Advocate?
No.
It was so good. What's his name? I'm losing my mind. Little Pie. That's why I got to get it out now. You know, read the books now because they won't be there tomorrow. You know? Let's see. Oh gosh. Real good actors. Okay, but one was the devil, and one was a failure.
Hold on.
Keanu Reeves and what's his name? Oh God, you know, in The Godfather and Dog Day Afternoon and Forever, Serpico, and what's his name? You know his name.
Not Al Pacino, is it?
Yes, yeah, Al
Thank you.
Pacino.
See, I saw his face. Yes. Okay, I have seen the movie. Yes.
Yeah, it was so good. But at the end, he has that really long explanation, a long speech, and he represents to me the ego, and this guy he kept capturing souls by their egos. This guy who always won his cases. So there was an ego there, and so at the end, he goes through the whole movie, he decides to, I'm going to divorce, I'm going to even kill myself to get rid of my ego, and then suddenly he pops back to the beginning of the story, and he has a chance to relive it all over again, and he just does something different, which was he looks like he stands up and tells the truth to power, basically, and then the next scene as they're going down, as they're leaving, the guy, the newspaper man says, "Oh, I got to write this up. This is the best story ever," and suddenly it all starts getting to be back in the ego thing. Okay, he gets caught up right at the end again in the ego thing, and I just love that point in that story, because it's like we can fight it, Buddha went and he starved himself, and he went and indulged himself. He did everything to get rid of it, and you cannot get rid of it. The ego. You can have momentary flashes of what it's like to live without the ego, but you can't. It's such an integral part of who we are and how we operate here. You can't get rid of it.
Right. By
fighting it, by ignoring it. No, but one of the best ways to minimize it, because that's why it's ego light, you can't kill it, but you can minimize it. And it's with a sense of humor. That sense of humor that, sort of like you do with a kid. You see a kid doing something silly. You have to get angry, violent with them and destroy them, or to ignore them, or you can just kind of laugh and say, right. And as we do that to ourselves enough, and we laugh at ourselves enough, it can be extremely healing, because it suspends the ego. It minimizes the ego,
Yes. Very much so. I know. Well, a kid's laugh is healing to my soul. So.
Oh, yes. It's heaven.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely true.
So anything else that you want to share to the audience, before we close out?
Are we all out of time, or?
We are.
Okay. No, I just hope to share. I got very little resources to do this with, so just want to get out there and connect with people who are doing the same work. We're asking the same questions. How do we do this? How do we heal? And what can we do? And please go to the website, check us out. We got good stuff there, and the books obviously are sort of my whole life, professional life, trying to understand this. Yeah, that's I guess.
Okay. Well, thank you for being here today and sharing your insights and the work you're doing. Shining that light of hope. I love it.
I hope so. Okay. I mean, I hope I am shining the light of hope.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to do a quick little closeout. Everyone, thank you for joining us today. And until next time, remember, be gentle with yourselves. Thanks. Bye-bye.